This is my father's pocket knife. He used this when he was trapping muskrats up in Red Bank. And he would get up in the morning, early, before school, and he would put boots on, and he would walk along the river up about 2 or 3 miles, and then back down the other side 2 or 3 miles. And he would check his traps. He would, they'd always be dead because you put them trap in a place where they go in under the thick bark and they get caught in a trap. You don't put the trap out where they can walk in. And you do these holes and you catch the trap and you catch all the muskrats. Then he'd bring them home and go to school. When he got out of school, he'd go out to the barn and he'd skin them and nail them onto the side of the barn so they dry. And I think he got like $2 for them. Right? And every once in a while they catch a mink, and that would be $20 or whatever. And then at the next tide, the only one every tide, so the next tide would be sometime in the night. You'd go back down and do it all over again. And you check them every day. And he did that for years and years and years. And there's some pictures, which I don't know where they are, of the barn with 100 muskrat pelts nailed to it drying. And then when you had 100 of them, you pack them up and go somewhere and sell them to some guy. They used them for making gloves, and cheap coats would have them in the collar instead of fox or whatever. But anyway, he used this all the while for that because, in those days, you needed a tool. For everything, you needed a tool. Nowadays, people go out in the woods and something happens and they got nothing. They can't do anything. They don't have a knife. They don't have anything. But in those days, everybody carried a pocket knife. And that's not having no value. It probably was 50 cents. Around 1920. But I just kept it because it was my dad's. He trapped until he was a grown man all through school. That was the only way he had to make money. So there was pictures of him still trapping, and he had a car and a motorcycle. All young men who worked had a car and a motorcycle. You could buy a used Model T or whatever. You could buy one of them pretty cheap, $500. And the motorcycle was probably $300, $400, $500. But young men then, just like now, wanted one thing: to go fast. And cars would not go fast. If you got 40 miles an hour out of a car, that was amazing. But a motorcycle would go 100. So then my dad, after he stopped this, he got a job with my uncle, and he painted houses, and he painted, those giant water towers that you see for the water? He painted them. And he had this job where he delivered the Long Branch record to Howell, Homedale, all those back areas every morning. He had a motorcycle with a sidecar on it, and he'd load it up and go and drop these things off at all the stores when they opened. And he made $18 a week. And then when my mom, one day he was riding and he slid off of the road, and he's laying there in the road, and they wear these big heavy gloves and big leather jackets because it was so cold. And he fell on his face, and the car came up and rode over the fringe on his jacket. And because the guy put the brake on, and the car tire marks were on the fringe like this. And my mom wouldn't marry him unless he went to work full-time painting, because she said you can't be a married man doing that every day. So then he painted the rest of his life till he died. So painted at home, painted.
Do what the lady says.
Well, he wanted to have a family. He was no kid by this time. He was probably 27, 28 years old. That's when he got married. And when World War II came along, my father was too old to be drafted, and he married a woman, and they had a kid, and so far he didn't get drafted. But all young men with one kid and a wife got drafted, but he was over 32, and they didn't draft nobody over 30. So he was air raid warden. He had a white hat, looked like a military hat from World War I. And he wore the hat and a flashlight, His job was, whenever they had a air raid drill, he would walk through the neighborhood and make sure that people had this special black shades to keep the light. They could have their light on in the house if they had black shades. If they didn't have black shades, they had to turn the lights out. So he'd knock on the door and tell them, you know, you got to turn the lights out. And most people, you know, they did it because they were patriotic. And at that same time, if you lived along the shore, you had to paint the top half of your headlights a dark color. And you could only have the bottom part of it shining down like this on the road, because they didn't want the submarines off of the Long Branch and Asbury to see the boats passing in front of them between the shore. So the U-boat would be here, the boat they wanted to destroy would be here, and the shore lights, they could see the lights moving off and on. As the boat moved along, the light would go out, and then it would come back on. They'd know there was a ship, and they'd sink it. That's about it. Oh, they had rationing, food rationing, metal rationing, every kind of rationing, gasoline rationing. Everything is a card. You've got a coupon. Maybe you could buy $5 gallons of gas a week if you could prove to them that you needed it for work. But if you couldn't prove you needed it for work, like a lady who lived at home and had a car, they wouldn't give her any gas at all for years. And you could buy so much flour, and that's it. You had to pay for it, but you're only allowed. If you had more money, you still couldn't buy more flour. So you could buy some meat, some chicken. So women would go to the butcher, and they'd say, "What do you got today?" And he'd say, "Well, I got some chicken and stuff." And she'd say, "Oh, I got a coupon for that." If you didn't have a coupon, he wouldn't sell it to you anyway. And everything was coupon.